Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith. Welcome to the Grow Tent, everybody. You have found the best growing channel on YouTube, man. The place where we simplify the approach for you so everyone can learn how to grow. We make it so simple, even I can understand. So I'm going to listen and learn right now.
Woo! What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Grow Tent. Welcome to Jurassic Park. No, welcome back to the Grow Tent, everybody. We got a great episode for you today. Today we're going to be talking about, can you put a plant in a pot big enough to where you don't have to feed it its entire life? And I got that question in email. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in video form, just send it to right there to thegrowtent@gmail.com, and maybe I'll make a video out of your question. I thought this would be a pretty fun one to do. So we're going to talk about that today. But as always, first, guys, if you could like, comment, subscribe, watch the full video, all that kind of stuff helps out the channel a ton. And I much appreciate it. So thank you for everybody that does that. I'm talking about you. You know who I'm talking about. You guys are all awesome. My new website is just about done being built, so the memberships will be back up soon and all the things that come with that. If you don't know what I mean, maybe check it out whenever. But I got a pretty cool video that I made. Well, Ricky GT made it. I got a pretty cool video that Ricky GT made. I was in there too. But I can't wait to show you guys. Should be pretty fun. I hope I don't get in trouble for it, but we might. But let's get today's episode started, guys. So the question came into me at email. Did I put my email up? If I didn't, I'll put it up earlier. The question came in my email, and I thought it was a good one. Can you put a plant in a pot big enough to where you don't ever have to feed it? So if you were doing it this way, you would either be doing it with a pre-amended soil like Fox Farms, or you would be doing it with an inert media and then adding slow-release dry amendments to the inert media. The answer to this question is yes, you absolutely can do this to where you don't ever have to physically, make up food and water. Like there's Bella. All right, dog pauses. Sorry about that. So you absolutely, yes, the answer to that is yes. You actually can put these plants in a big enough pot to where you don't have to feed them their entire lives. It does come with sets of drawbacks like everything else. So if you're a new grower, I 1000% do not recommend you doing this, because the chances that you are going to overwater the plants now, I mean, it skyrockets, because generally it's way easier to overwater a plant that is a smaller plant in a big pot than a big plant in the correct size pot. But if we're specifically talking about can you do this, the answer is yes, for the most part. Now, will it maybe come up where you get through veg most of the way through flower and then you start to see a deficiency? Yeah, this is an extremely likely case for thing to happen, because even if, let's say, you had a small plant in a big pot, you don't know, we don't know, especially if we're just growing in like slow release dry amendment, or I'm sorry, if we're going in like Fox Farms, we don't exactly know what ppm the bags are. Like generally, Happy Frog will come in a bag that is between 1700 and 2200 ppm that's in the bag already. And then if you go into like the Strawberry Fields, or you go to the Ocean Forest, generally those bags are anywhere from 2200 to, I've seen them as high as 4000 ppm. And if you get one of those bags where you see 4,000, generally you're just not going to be feeding that plant very often, because there's so much food that's already in that bag. But if you have one of the lower bags, like I've also seen bags where they were 800 ppm, which means I was like, okay, well, this has got a week's worth of food in it, and we're probably going to have to start feeding, even though we just transplanted. And we're back, dogs again. I cut them completely out this time. Sorry about that. They're being very ornery today. So, generally, if you were going to set this up, overwatering aside, we're going to pretend like you've got watering down, and we're not even going to think about the overwatering aspect of this. If we're not thinking about overwatering at all, because you've got it down pat, and all we're concerned about is, I want to make it through this this grow without having to feed? Okay, so our biggest question that we have to pertain to now, because now we got to select our pot size. Our biggest question that we have to come up with now is, how long are we going to veg these plants? And are we going to transplant? Are you trying to do... So there's a couple questions we have to ask here. Are we trying to not transplant the plants at all? Because whenever you say, you know, you don't want to feed through the entire grow, whenever you transplant and put them into fresh soil, that's technically you are feeding. Even though you're transplanting, a nice benefit of that is they're getting fresh soil, which means they're getting new food. So are you talking about you don't want to feed the entire grow? That includes transplanting, so you want to start them in their final pot? If that's true, you're going to need a little bit bigger of a pot and a shorter veg time. So if I'm doing something like I'm going to run 5 plants in a 2x4, which is a lot of plants for a little 2x4, I will run something like a 2.5 week veg, and I will just immediately put them into their 3-gallon pots, keep them in veg for 2.5 weeks, and then immediately flip them to flower. Whenever I do this, generally I only feed the plants one time. So they have their 3 gallons of soil, and then I will feed them one time. I'll give them like a finishing feed around week 6 of flower. So if I do it that way, I only feed one time the entire grow. I literally just let them eat what is in the soil their entire lives. And generally, whenever I'm going to do something like this, the top half of the bottom half of the 3-gallon pot, I have Ocean Forest in, and then the top half of the pot, I have Happy Frog in, which is where the plant sits at first. And then I just kind of let them eat and go through it. And then around week 6 of flower, I will give them a single feed. So that doesn't really count because I do feed them once, but it's only a single feed, and it's only usually 500 or 600 ppm is all I'm giving them. Could they make it through without that feeding? Yeah, they probably could. I don't think you would get as good results. You probably cost yourself about 20-25% of your in yield by missing that last feeding. It's a pretty important one for their weeks of food. Now, if I was setting that up and I was like, I'm going to do a no feeding grow, and then I get my bags of food home and I'm like, oh, these only have 1300 ppm, I'm actually going to go get different bags, or I'm going to add slow release dry amendments like Gaia Green or whatever you want to use. They're all the same stuff. I'm going to add supplement to those bags, and to be honest, I would probably not use that soil at all. If my goal was to get through a grow with no feeding, I probably just wouldn't use that soil because for one, it's low on ppm already, and then number 2, you don't know what that ppm is. Or if you're going with your organic style grow, like you got build a soil or something like that, whenever you're using those soils or those kind of things, you don't feed. It's all that stuff, you've pre-mixed it in there. Just like if you're using cocoa and you've preloaded your dry amendments in there, your slow release dry amendments, you will have to reload those throughout the grow because they don't last forever. But if you're using something like build a soil, you just water those plants their entire life. So you can use any of it. Just depends on what style you're going to use. We use synthetic and pre-amended soil on this channel, so that's generally what I talk about. But all these other grow methods, they all work really, really well also, as long as you don't abuse them. But other than that, they all really, really work. So the main answer to the question is yes. Your 2 questions you have to ask yourself is, how long do I want to veg? Because the longer you have to veg, the bigger the pot you have to use. Like, hey, I'm going to do an 8-week veg. We're going to be in 7 or 10 gallon pots then. And are you going to transplant the plants at all? Because if you're going to transplant the plant, your pots don't have to be nearly as big, and you can stretch out your veg time a little bit longer on top of it. So if you've got a big tent, generally if you transplant going through here, you can make this entire operation a lot easier than if you were going to just, no, I'm just going to run one pot. I want to start them in their final home. I've got my overwatering. I'm not going to do that. I've got my watering down pat. Then that's absolutely something you can do pretty easily. I recommend not feeding? Like, I wouldn't make it like a challenge though. Like, don't make this like I'm going to get through an entire grow without feeding. I would rather, because you can run because you can run into things where what if the plant is, you've got some plants that are over feeders and they're running through their nutrients quicker. So this is one of the things you're going to have to watch out for, and it's one of the reasons that we check runoff and watch the ppm in between waterings. So if we're checking our runoff with our ppm pin in between waterings, we can look at what the plants are actually eating week to week. So if I go in there on Saturday and I'm like, okay, this plant has 1,500 ppm runoff, and then I go in the next Saturday and the plant has 1,200 ppm runoff. Okay, I know, great. This plant's eating about 300 ppms per week. And then I can go and I'll check all the other plants at the same time. I'm like, okay, great. These plants are all eating roughly between 250 and 350 ppm per week. And then I get to the one in the corner and I check it and it's at 1,000 ppms. Okay. This plant ate 500 ppms. I better keep an eye on this one. I might have to bonus this one up some, because you can absolutely have this. These plants are all individuals, and you can have plants that eat lighter, and you can have plants that are heavy feeders. And if you have a plant, this is one of the things that you can check to keep your garden. You've got a garden full of individuals in there that you're trying to make look like identical twins. And you can have plants in there that are eating more than the others. And if you've ever been through this, you'll notice whenever you're doing your garden, you're like, oh yeah, they all look kind of great, and this one over here is kind of like got spots all over it, and it's fading faster than the rest because it's eating faster. It's an overfeeder, and you're feeding it the same as the others. One of the things we have to do as gardeners whenever we're taking care of these gardens is those are things we have to check. And if while I'm doing my general maintenance week to week, I know it's like, hey, this plant eats more, I am physically going to give that plant more food, so that whenever I come through the end, it keeps my gardens looking uniform. And that's why we get colas in every trellis net hole, and all the colas are the same size, and the plants in the garden all fades at the same time, because we do these kind of things. And this would become extremely important if you were trying not to feed throughout your grow, is you really have to watch this kind of stuff, otherwise it could cost you a little bit of yield in the end. But other than that, I think that kind of covers all the bases. Your main questions you just have to ask yourself is, are you going to transplant, and how long you're going to veg? And if you had more specific questions about, okay, GT, I want to veg this long, this is about my average plant size, I'm going to be in this size tent, this is my plant count, what do you think, what kind of pot size do you think I need? Just send me an email and I can walk you through it. All right, hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the week. Like, we got a little more in-depth than I thought it was going to, but I hope everybody had a good time, and maybe give me a thumbs up if you learned anything, or if you hated it, just be like, GT, you suck. I'll see you guys next time. GT, out.